Welcome, everyone. This is a presentation called Multidimensionality and Enlightenment, a conversation with Jurgen Ziewe. I'll be the host for today. My name is Michael Leiden, and this is a Perfectly Okay community event. So the Perfectly Okay community is a group that's loosely organized by a group of volunteers who are alumni of the Finder's Course, 45 Days to Awakening Challenge, and similar evidence-informed courses on awakening. If you want more information on these courses, you can go to nonsymbolic.org. And for free, independently organized events that are for the public and classes from members of our community, you can go to openbeing.org. And our very special guest today is Jurgen Ziewe. And Jurgen offers a very unique perspective in that he's both an author on spiritual awakening as well as an explorer of multidimensional consciousness through out-of-body experiences. And so Jurgen began meditating at an early age, and at one point started having spontaneous experiences where he was fully self-aware in non-physical dimensions. And he spent hundreds of hours exploring the non-physical in these out-of-body experiences, which lasted often several hours at a time. And in his books, Jurgen's mapped out what he's considered to be the multidimensional reality that we inhabit even in our waking state, but that becomes, of course, more knowable in out-of-body experiences and when we die, or when we transition from physical reality to the non-physical. So Jurgen has authored 2 books on non-physical dimensions of consciousness. One is Multidimensional Man, and the other is Vistas of Infinity, How to Enjoy Life When You're Dead. And his book on awakening, spiritual awakening, which came out in 2013. Jurgen, you can correct me if I'm wrong there. But this was a book detailing spiritual awakening experiences during a solitary retreat. You can read more about Jurgen's writings if you want on multidimensionalman.com. And Jurgen is currently working on an art project with BAFTA-nominated composer Craig Pruis to create virtual reality experiences based on these more celestial or evolved or divine infused non-physical dimensions. And these are all free for the wider community. And the purpose there is to uplift and immerse people. And if you want to learn more about that project or support it, you can go to magicfantasyart.com. Okay, Jurgen, welcome. Great to have you here.
Okay, thanks for asking me. Should be fun, hopefully.
Okay, awesome. So just to get the conversation started, I feel like you occupy, whether you know it or not, you occupy a bit of a unique position in both the world of what I would call non-dual spirituality, where we're on this in this adventure towards stabilizing in the felt lived experience of oneness, or the non-dual experience between ourselves and the world around us, or ourselves and the ground of being. And so there are people that are in that camp, but who might be atheists or agnostics, or they might think that, oh, well, all of this is just going on in the brain. And then there are people who you could say are in the lucid dreaming out-of-body camp, who might be aware of non-dual spirituality, or they might not be, right? But one thing that they do know is that the physical world is not all there is to life. And so I think that you occupy a quite unique position in that you kind of occupy both spaces, where and so in my experience, that's quite a unique thing.
Yes, I think the issue is I never intend or didn't even know anything about out-of-body experiences until I started meditating, until I was meditating for about 3 years. And I didn't believe in anything occult, anything mystic. I started meditation basically because somebody told me it would get rid of my depression, which was the residue of a LSD experience. And it put me into depression because I had quite a tremendous high. That was in 1969. And then coming down made me aware of an incredible discrepancy between higher and normal human consciousness. And that sent me into a deep depression.
Mm.
And somebody said, well, you need to get out of it. Why don't you start meditation? So I did. And I started with transcendental meditation. And lo and behold, after 3 months, I got rid of my depression, but also I became very curious about the whole spiritual aspect of life. And that sent me on the road to discovery. And I started to read books. One guy, Paul Brunton, was the first person who introduced me to spirituality. And so it took on its life on its own, of its own. And yeah, and then the big breakthrough came very spontaneously after I actually stopped meditation because I was frustrated by the lack of result, because I wanted to follow my heroes and become enlightened without knowing what it meant or what it felt like. And so after I had a very negative experience, where I confronted my shadow, which came to the surface as a result of my delving into the subconscious, I then stopped meditation. I described it in some of my other videos, what happened. And then 6 months after I stopped, I had a spontaneous peak experience, you could call it. And that was a breakthrough experience which changed everything. Not only did I have a complete immersion into, I can only call it absolute consciousness, because there was no other way. I had no way of finding any descriptions for it, any narrative. It was beyond concept, beyond words, beyond attributes. It was a state of pure clarity. And that was accompanied by an incredible ecstasy, not just one, but it came in waves. And with every ecstasy, I had a new revelation about who I was. And the thing was, if I can express it in human language, the first thing that came to me was almost as if somebody said to me, oh, there you are. Welcome back. Where have you been? And it was this connection with my authentic self. But not only that, but with the thing that was at the root of my authentic self. And this sent me into these states of ecstasy at the time. And when this passed, for 3 weeks, I was walking around not having any connection to my personal self. I was just in a space of being. And there was no identification other than with everything that we refer to as life and reality. Now, this was a state I tried to cope with as best as I could. I tried to pretend I was normal, go back to college. But I wasn't. I was in this state of incredible serenity and peace, and I couldn't talk to anybody. And it gradually subsided. But what I was left with was a very powerful feeling that I knew where I had to be if I wanted to make sense of this life. I knew it, and it wouldn't go away. It was like a beacon or like a lighthouse in my life. I knew I had to go aim for that. I've got to be there again. Now, the thing was, it also left something else behind, which I later referred to as my silent companion. There was an awareness of being. It almost felt as if somebody was walking alongside me. And it didn't talk to me, it didn't say anything, but it was a presence. And this presence was something which I knew I could trust. And much later, and it sort of was always with me, except when I became inauthentic, when I started getting too full of myself or went on an ego trip. The moment something like that happened, it disappeared. My silent companion was nowhere to be seen. I became fully immersed in the role playing of my ego self. And so this became then like a teacher aspect in my life. I never had a guru or any teachers in my life other than what I got through books. And this teacher aspect was with me when I was being authentic. When I was inauthentic, it would disappear. So it taught me to be as authentic and as true to myself as I could possibly be. So the other aspect was I could ask questions. And that was a beautiful aspect. I could ask questions and it would respond to me in silence. And the silence would allow me space to find the answer to what I asked from within. And this was when I became aware gradually, which took, quite a few dozen years, but it was what I later sort of recognized as a knowing field, a field of knowledge, where all knowledge, all not material knowledge, not human knowledge in the sense, but more wisdom knowledge was contained, and I could refer to this wisdom knowledge and it would provide me with an answer, if I had a difficult question, and also it was a feeling of home, it gave me a feeling of belonging, this companion. I was not alone. Now, to cut a long story short, after I had this peak experience, that was in 1972, a few months later, I had, because the peak experience was basically an experience where I was totally divorced from my ego self. It disappeared. I was depersonalized. It started off by me looking at my sandwich and my cup of coffee and suddenly realizing I didn't know who was holding my breakfast. Okay, I thought, who do these hands belong to? And this was a trigger which escalated into this state of rupture. And then I think this was a fundamental change, which then I think invited the out-of-body experience which happened afterwards, about sort of 6 months later, perhaps, maybe after I met my wife, and we lived together, and then I suddenly found myself in a place in my mother's house, or in front of my mother's house, in full waking consciousness, knowing perfectly well that I was also asleep in my bed 80 miles away. And that was a trigger. I had no idea such a thing was possible. And the first thing I did was I was searching for explanations for it. And I thought the medical section, the library, brain tumors, you name it, everything was open, to be investigated to find an answer. And then fortunately I was put in going through the different sections from the medical to the psychology section in the library. I came across parapsychology, and I came across a phenomena which was called the doppelganger. That was in Germany, of course. None of the terminology which we know about now was available. And this, when I talked to a friend about my experience, he said, oh yes, it sounds like Castaneda. So he said, you should read Castaneda. he lent me a book which was called A Separate Reality, and there Castaneda explained it in beautiful language, what had happened to me. After this event, I started to become very curious, and the out-of-body experiences started happening almost on a regular basis. And so that was the beginning of it all.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. And I think that kind of catches everybody up a little bit to your background, for those of you who have not read Jurgen's books yet. And can you also talk about what happened? Because I know that you learned that you had cancer at one point, and that is what led to a particular period of really focusing in the present moment and making sure that you were living with as much authenticity as possible, kind of perhaps not knowing how much time you had left on this planet. And then that's what led to the solitary retreat. Is that about right?
Yes, that's correct. It happened about 10 years ago in 2011. And I had a routine checkup at the hospital. And the thing was, I've been meditating for about 40 years by then. I was very well into, the higher states, really. Meditation was my bread and butter. Not a day went by where I didn't do at least an hour or 2 hours of meditation. But the thing was, after I had this checkup at the hospital, I had a call, and they asked me whether they could see me. And I said, sort of half jokingly, "What do you want to tell me? Do I have cancer?" And she was very quiet, and I became very curious. And then she said, "Yes, I'm sorry to tell you, you've got cancer." So I was shocked. Of course, I consider myself a very healthy person. But as thing unrolled, I needed to check it out. But the thing was, I had the same kind of cancer which 2 of my friends were diagnosed with. And one died, and the other one died 3 months after my diagnosis. And I thought, oh, I have got to be, careful with my time, how I spend my time. You have to bear in mind, at that time, I didn't have any fear. I didn't have any fear of this, because I've died so many times, I knew exactly what was taking place. I knew the non-physical states, like this state. It was home territory to me. So I wasn't afraid. I never had any fear of dying. And I thought, well, this is a nuisance, really, but I don't want to occupy myself with the illness. So I made a decision right from the beginning. I let the experts deal with my illness, which are the doctors. They know a lot more about it, and that is no longer my responsibility. But because I may not have a long time here, I thought I must make the most out of it. And the only way I knew to make the most out of it was by focusing all my awareness on the present moment. Because by that time I realized that thoughts are thoughts and experiences are temporary. And I thought the only way you can really get the most out of your time is by focusing your awareness totally on the present moment. So in hindsight, I found that the cancer diagnosis was the best thing that happened in my life, because I went through an incredible intensive period for at least sort of 3 months until I had the operation, where I was totally aware of the present moment. And the other aspect was, if there had been any fear, that was no longer accessible to me. And also, the living in the moment provided me with an incredible joy. And the way I regarded the time since the diagnosis was, I was always in my living room. I was always at home. And wherever I went, I was at home. I took my living room with me, you know. And so this feeling of being secure and being home, you know, was constantly there. Then then things went dramatically wrong when I went into hospital. I was actually, the operation went really bad, and I nearly died. And I was hemorrhaging heavily. I had 2 operations. They severed an artery, and my body was absolutely bruised. And the 3rd time in the hospital, I had a really bad infection, which normally kills about 70% of bowel cancer patients when they have the infection. But the thing was, I wasn't afraid. I was still in this serenity of the moment. And that was beautiful. But my body was totally bruised. And I was on a ward with, I just tell the stories because it's quite interesting. I was on a ward with 5 other people who were just as sick, perhaps even more sick than I was. And I felt desperately sorry for them, you know. And in the meantime, I was trying to deal with the physical trauma. But I felt sorry for them, and I thought, I can't possibly feel sorry for myself, you know, when there are people around me who are so much worse off. And then something really interesting happened. There was a tiny nurse from the Philippines. She came to me, and she obviously recognized that I wasn't doing very well physically. And I was trying to bottle it up. And then she actually did a very beautiful thing. She pulled the curtain around my bed and held my hand, and she started crying.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the moment she started crying, I felt an incredible relief. And that was a moment I felt there are people in this world who are angels. I can't, you know, we didn't even talk about anything, you know, but she took this sort of pain of my body, this body pain, into herself, and she dealt with it, you know. And that was a bit of a revelation for me. I thought there are people in this world who are so powerful, so full of compassion. They can take on anything and deal with it, and, you know, and disperse with it. So that was another very beautiful experience that came out of this. Of course, after I came out of this hospital, I made a very rapid recovery, and carried on with my meditation and everything. And then a couple of years later, I decided to go on a retreat in a little hut in Scotland to write a book. I wanted to write Vistas of Infinity, which I had been planning to do. And then a friend of mine said, don't do that, you know, just meditate, just be. And to me, that was the obvious thing. This is what I was going to do, you know, no plans, just be in this beautiful, secluded space and just meditate. And so this is what then led to the 10-minute moment, because it was a 10-minute moment. That was the 2nd time or the 3rd time in my life I had this rapturous experience I had in 1972. And the 2nd time it happened during an out-of-body state where an inner master taken me through all the different levels of consciousness on an inner journey, again into this space of unity. And then in 2013, when I was on the retreat, that was the 3rd time this happened in my life. And then when this happened, the spell was broken. I couldn't connect to anything I was before. It was almost as if my history had been wiped away. And I had no personal history. There was only the present moment from then on. And it was hard to not be there, you know. And I discovered then, this is a raw state of our being. That is where we belong. And that was a realization, realizing that everybody has got this raw state, you know, and this is where we need to reorientate ourselves. So yes, this was beautiful. And of course, I still meditated, although I felt there was no need to meditate because everything was reality, everything was being after that. You know, I didn't have to focus on anything that was connected to being. But the thing was, of course, I still did meditate. And I found that when you meditate and you are connected into being state, you are, your consciousness still sort of expands. There are still areas in consciousness which are purely infinite. And so there is no end point. There's only a continuous beginning in life. And this is what I find is taking place.
Yeah, in the Buddha at the gas pump interview, you and Rick had talked about what you say when you wake up in the morning. It was, this is the first day of my infinite life.
Yeah, yeah.
I like that quite a bit.
Yeah, because there is no death. That's one big illusion. You know, there's not even an afterlife. There's only life. You know, and if awareness becomes continuous, you know, then it's just like closing your eyes and opening them up again. And that's what I'm trying to document with my videos, that death is basically going through the front door into the world. Nothing changes. And people will be really surprised. And there's so much talk about ghosts and what happens to us. Do we turn into mist or into balls of light? You know, is there anything there? And that is the incredible beauty of reality, that consciousness is all embracing, is infinite, you know, and there's no end. There's only continuous unfoldment. And we're just focusing on a tiny aspect in this life, which we have sort of assigned to ourselves, given ourselves a role to play in, being oblivious that there's only a microscopic part of the whole thing. And that is what I find is so incredibly beautiful and so incredibly exciting. When we get to the point where we can see this little life of ours in the context of everything else. And there's such a liberating feeling, you know. And yeah, it's beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I want to discuss one more thing that you've said in the past about coming home, and then maybe we can open up for a few questions from the group. So you've described the process of awakening as a process of homecoming, and with each progressive deepening into awakening, it feels like you're closer and closer to something that you could call home. You know, if we want to call that bare reality or life itself or being itself or existence itself. And how would you describe the shift that occurred when you were at your when you were at your retreat in Scotland? Because you talked about your silent companion feeling like something that was slightly, you know, outside of yourself to some extent, and then that viewpoint shifted. So can you maybe walk everybody through what happened there?
Yes, the silent companion aspect, which was very powerful, I recognized that was an awareness of my higher self, if you like. You know, it was an awareness of a presence which wasn't quite me, but it was close enough to be identified as part of me. Okay, and then when I had this this third peak experience, the silent companion disappeared because I realized I was the silent companion. So this shift taking place was basically telling me, okay, now I'm home. There is no outside world. Wherever I am, there's me in a way that I'm not attached to this defined individual, which I call Jurgen, who does certain things. That's not what I am. It's part of me. But I'm sort of identified with something which is everywhere and is in the moment. And the thing was also, how to describe it? Before, I would say you're outside in the world and you're looking over the fence and there's another world, okay? And you think, oh, that's a beautiful place over there. I wish I could be there. But when this shift happens, the fence disappears and there's only an open field. And also the other way of putting it is you get a top-down view, you know, like in some video games. You see, there are all these characters playing out, but you're looking down on it and you see the whole picture, okay? And you are just a character playing, interacting with other people. And so you're seeing what's happening to you. Interesting when, for example, let's say I messed up driving a car and I caused a road rage by somebody who I sort of may have taken, cut up or something. And then it suddenly, it feels that the rage is sort of passing over your shoulder. There's no recipient for it, okay? And you feel his anger and you feel sorry, of course, you apologize, you know what you have caused the person, but you don't take any offense. Instead, what you do is you become empathic with a person who was angry with you because you caused his anger. So you take full responsibility for it. And at the same time, you release love, you release a blessing. And that evens out any sort of negativity that may have been released at that point. And this also applies to positive things. You know, you're not identified with things, you know, praise or anything like that, because that is like, that passes sort of through you, you know, or you look around and think, who is meant by this comment? You know, who is this person? It's not you. You can identify. You have no longer a grip on this personality. That is just no longer there. That's what I say, the history of you is gone. You know, there's only the present. And that, of course, is beautiful because it means total liberation for anything we hold dear, you know, because you always see the bigger picture.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think that there's, you know, probably most of the folks here can relate to what you're saying or can appreciate it, you know, experientially or as something that they're certainly striving for. Yeah. There's a question from Ron. Ron, why don't you go ahead and unmute and ask your question?
Thank you for calling on me. So it's so wonderful to hear you speak. The authenticity resonates so deeply. What I'd like to ask you is, I've seen many videos and read a lot of books on near-death experiences, and and all the wonderful experiences that people have. I'm wondering if when you think of these, there's so many different types. Some people say that they saw Jesus, and there's a whole range of experiences. But I'm wondering if you think that these people are seeing something objectively true, or some of them are, or if it's completely subjective, that people are experiencing deeper layers of their individual psyches. So could you say something about what you think is universal to everyone in these experiences, as opposed to an individual personal experience of deeper levels, even transpersonal levels of their own consciousness?
Yes, I think I've thought about it a lot. I have never really met Jesus, but I had some experiences which were really quite mind-boggling, really. I was actually going to make it the central part of another book if I get around to writing it. But I think people who meet Jesus in a near-death experience, they're connecting to a core aspect of consciousness, okay? And I think what happens is people like Jesus, Buddha, Ramana Maharshi, people like that are fully realized people. And they actually, once they're triggered, they are actually present, become presence. Their consciousness is using a conduit which the person knows or relates to, or is the closest thing they can think of by defining it. And this higher consciousness uses this conduit of Jesus, and it may actually be Jesus. Okay, I don't think it's a projection. I found this, for example, I'm very fond of Ramana Maharshi. Okay, I've read his book, and when I think about him, I can almost feel his presence. Okay, and I had a similar experience when I was hiding away in a little fishing hut when I was writing Business of Infinity. I was reading a book by Teresa of Avila, the Interior Castle. She was a Catholic nun, and so I was meditating, writing, meditating, sleeping. So I had no discrimination between night and day, and sometimes I would just pick up her book and read it in the middle of the night, and I could feel her presence. And I think it's higher consciousness. People who are realized, self-realized, they are it. Okay, this will only become apparent when we get an insight into these higher states. Then we know who these people are, and we can relate to them. And in fact, we can get very close to them. Okay, and there are so many testimonies of people who had near-death experiences. That's impossible to, I can't, consider my own experience. I had a few other experiences when I went to Greece, to Mount Athos with a friend of mine. And I was looking at an icon of the Virgin Mary with a child, and I'm not a Catholic. They nearly didn't let me into the monastery because I'm not even a Christian. And then one of the monks, after we talked for a day about meditation, he said, come and have a look at I told him I'm very fond of the icons because I'm an artist and I know how they were painted. They painted them in prayer. Okay, every brushstroke was a prayer. Okay, they were beautiful. So he said, come and have a look at this icon, And he took me into a chapel which was only for ordained monks. No visitors were allowed into this chapel. And he sort of said, sit down here. And he lowered a chandelier so that lit the candle so the icon was illuminated. And in front of me was the Virgin Mary with a child. And I never believed in any of this Catholic thing. Okay, that was not my background. But suddenly I was totally overwhelmed with an incredible love, you know, and I was starting to sort of lose a little bit of a grip because I felt a downpour of incredible blessing, you know, and that as a non-Catholic, you know. So there is a connection. When we connect to higher consciousness, we also connect to the people who went before, who went on the same path and realized this state, and they are there now, alive, okay? And they are ready for us when we sort of connect to them. And that's what I not just believe, but that's also my experience.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Laurel, go ahead.
Hello. Thank you for this splendid journey, learning of your life. I'm wanting to know whether your wife, through proximity, also developed this experience of journeying out of the body, whether it's a teachable skill, and whether when you spoke of the continuity of life, lots of us would like to get off the wheel of incarnation. And I'm wondering what you might have to say about that.
But my wife, did you say?
Well, first with your wife, when you were having these experiences, was she able to join you in them?
No, my
That's
wife,
one question. And then the other question was getting off the wheel, which many of us would like to do. What you might have to say about that.
yes, but my wife is a different story, really, because we've only been married for 50 years, and we're still getting to know each other. Okay, because she's on a totally different boat to me.
Uh-huh.
She's a psychotherapist, a counselor, and she's also my teacher. You know, if without my wife, I wouldn't be anywhere now where I sort of progressed to, because she is a very realistic person, and I always get the feeling from people that being an artist, I'm a bit, especially my brother, he thinks I'm a bit nuts, really. You have to be nuts to be an artist, and also to have an out-of-body experience, you have to be totally nuts, you know. And so my wife has always been rooting me to the physical aspect of life. We share the spiritual aspect without actually putting a narrative to it. But as a counselor, she is very intuitive. For example, she told me when she counsels people, suddenly she refers to the parent of one of her clients, telling her that he is an alcoholic. And her client is very shocked. She said, I never said that, but it turned out to be true. So she connects to this kind of level of reality in a very intuitive way, you know. And it is on this level that we are grounded and together, okay? But we have very little in common. But this is a beautiful thing, because that puts you in a position of continuous learning.
Yes.
So yeah, she is not interested in out-of-body experiences or
Wow.
anything like that. And I dare not talk about it. Then the eyes sort of roll up,
Even when she sees your magnificent paintings.
Yeah, she loves my work. Of course, she always has done. But yeah, that's the beauty of relationships, that you can still find a newness, on an almost daily basis, because you still surprise each other. So I'm a great believer in diversity, really. I don't know whether it works for everyone, but we have been together nearly 50 years now.
Wow, that's a powerful experience. So the other parts of my question, do any of your books give a guide for how to have these sorts of experiences? And the other part of the question was about getting off the wheel of life, death, and rebirth.
Yes, I never saw myself as a teacher, I always saw myself as a reporter, really. I have experience, I write about them, I share them with people, simply other out-of-body experiences. They find a consensus, by talking about it. But there are people who are actually very good at teaching these things. But I've never really set out to prove anything or to teach anything, because I think it's such an individual path for everyone. I never felt comfortable by putting out a teaching system, although there are probably very good systems and teaching methods and very, very good teachers. But to me, meditation, my path was always very dynamic. I was never comfortable of hanging on to a special technique, and nearly all my out-of-body experiences, except in the beginning where I experimented and initiated them, they were all spontaneous. And it was always a call from, it was either happening through meditation or during the dream state. Sometimes I went into meditation and I would clip out. There was a second of unconsciousness, and the next moment I was fully aware in a different reality.
Wow.
But my awareness was so acute that I was fully conscious in another dimensional level. Because I knew what was happening, I instantly took charge of it and then explored, the environment. And very often there was a teaching aspect attached to this awareness, which didn't come from my ego self. It came from a deeper aspect in myself, which then, especially in Vistas of Infinity, all these sort of were rolled out into explaining certain aspects of the afterlife state. For example, one important aspect which happened to me was I was worried and concerned about people who sacrifice themselves for their faith in a suicide attack, killing a lot of people. And that always concerned me. I said, what's going on here? What's happening to these people? And then I had an experience where I visited one of these perpetrators. And through this visit, it became clear to me the whole mechanics of what happens, people who do certain things, what happens to them. The hell they experience is often the hell of not being able to undo it, and so they have to live with this inability of undoing and reaping the repercussions, being confronted with the effects. So that was one experience. And I found that a lot of these experiences I had, they were giving me more clues about the incredible diversity of what's happening on the other dimensional levels. And so my meditation as well, it was very dynamic. During the course of my meditation, I started off as transcendental meditation, and then it became, I used other mantras. And then at one stage, I received a mantra from within, which I used for about 2 or 3 years until it sort of lost its power. And then I meditated on being, you know, just being, which became the predominant aspect of my practice. Another thing which I advocate in terms of meditation, which came to me when I was on my retreat in Scotland, is that if your meditation technique consists of focusing on the light, okay, instead of focusing on the light, I started focusing on being the light, being the source of the light, okay, and shining the light out. And I found that is a really good way to get to the core of yourself. The other technique, for example, is the other thing I learned during my out-of-body states is to chant the mantra. Very often I use the out-of-body state to carry on meditation. You know, I thought, oh, now I'm out of body. What happens when I meditate? And what I used was the Om mantra. The moment I chanted the Om while I was out of my body, I shot into higher states of consciousness, which would have been impossible to do while I was in physical body meditation, you know. And so the Buddhists, they have a technique called dream yoga, which they use to get out of body and then actually do the proper meditation while out of the body. Wow. Because you can then get into a much higher state. And I try to tell people who are astral projecting, and I belong to various groups of astral projectors, I tell you, try it, use the Om mantra. And people are doing that, and they report incredible results, you know. And of course, there are people now in this community who have broken the barrier of the personal identity. So out-of-body experience can be just another path. And I talked to out-of-body experiencers who said, oh, I'm bored now with out-of-body experience. Is there something else I can do, you know? And I say, yes, there's meditation, you know, when you're out of your body. Because some people are stranded on a level or an environment which is quite mundane, which is basically a reflection of our physical world, with the added advantage that we can fly. But it's not that different, you know. And then very often, or sometimes people think after they experimented a little bit, they feel, oh, I want to progress, you know. And the other thing is with out-of-body experiences, sometimes they're very limited. You know, people, I know of a person who spent 20 years being out of the body, but she never left her house.
Yeah.
You know, she reports about this, she goes into the street, but that's it. That's the level of her experience. You know, whereas I think, oh, that's, you know, the universe is without limits. You know, you can do anything. So yes, sorry, I can't be more specific. I think they're very good teachers. And what it is really practice, practicing awareness during the day. Keeping a dream journal is very good. Becoming more aware of your dreams, because the dreams, we all have out-of-body experiences at night, except we are not aware of it. So by keeping a dream journal, we become more conscious of the experience. We recall more dreams. Although we get the feeling that we are more active at night, but we are not. We are just more aware. So once we keep a dream journal, write down all our dreams, the dream world becomes a more reality, a better reality than to us, you know. And then it's just a matter of becoming aware in the dream, which is an entry point, and it's called a lucid dream. The moment we are aware in our dream and we are lucid, then we have the option to do whatever we want to do. And our awareness can then be used to do meditation, to visit our deceased relatives, friends, to investigate who we are, to even explore the nature of reality or the Akashic records. I mean, I had experiences where I was, because I'm a commercial illustrator, I had experiences where somebody said, I have to do some medieval knights, you know, in the illustration. And I looked for references in books, and I said, oh, I wonder what they really looked like, you know. So I had an out-of-body experience, and I said, show me a medieval knight. And I was surprised. I saw a knight in the flesh, and I was surprised by the other garments they wore, which I didn't see illustrated. There was one which had a coat which was knitted. There's a big broad knitting pattern held together with brooches and all sorts of things which the knights in the literature didn't show, you know. So it's this sort of thing, this wealth of information which is in our subconscious or hidden in the other levels of reality. And that was, these can be checked out. The other thing was I was illustrating a book on the cosmos, and the editor of the book asked me, can you do us an illustration on the Big Bang? Okay. And I said, okay, what it looked like? And he said, oh, we don't know. You're the artist. Make something up, you know. So I thought I can't do that because everybody will take this as a blueprint and it could be totally wrong, you know. So I then had an out-of-body experience a couple of nights later, and I sort of shouted out of body, take me to the Big Bang. And in an instant, I was suspended in space, but there was no Big Bang. There were just four sounds, you know, interacting with each other, and no Big Bang. And I came back and I said to the editor, I said, I'm not sure about this Big Bang thing, you know. What about if there was no Big Bang, but there were just sort of sound vibrations, you know, and everything sort of developed out of that, you know. And he said, no, we have to stick to the Big Bang. That's what everybody knows. So I then thought, oh, could be. I talked then to a person in America. She teaches at Texas University. I said, she also had was an out-of-body experience. I said, what about this Big Bang? You know, what about if there was a feedback mechanism which led to this Big Bang between the sounds and things? So to cut a long story short, I ended up doing an illustration of a Big Bang, which was pure fantasy.
Thank you. Can I just find out if you have insights about death and rebirth, karma, reincarnation?
Yes, I had this, which I've illustrated or documented in the book Vistas of Infinity. I saw myself, the totality of myself, as the best metaphor I could find was like a tapestry, or in Hindu mythology, they refer to as Indra's web. Okay, so which is a sort of massive web where each connection point represents a life. Okay, and that can not only represents a life you have lived, but also lives lived by other people. The whole web is connected, connects everything in creation. Okay, and referring it to your personal self, you see the individual self has got lots of these connection points, where each connection point is a past life. And what I did was I focused in on one life, on one connection point, and lo and behold, there was me in a different body. And the moment I entered into it, there are different ways of entering into it, but the moment I entered into it, it was a here and now experience in that life. And in Multidimensional Man, I sort of described a few of these lives, but it happens in a here and now way. It's not a vision, it's not a memory or recall, it's an experience. And once you're fully aware in that life, you can see it from all sorts of different aspects. This full awareness, you can even see it. Let's say you had a partner in that life. You can even see your life through the eyes of your partner. That is the Akashic records, a past life experience. It's not just that we sort of have a picture of who we were. We can actually experience it. And so what happens, as far as I'm aware, is when we connect to the totality of our being, we get all the information of who we are. But there is no way our personal self is able to make a decision from our ego point of view and say, oh, okay, next time I want to do this, This is not our decision, It is a decision of our real self, okay? Our higher self, if you like. And it is an aspect which has got total understanding or total knowledge of the totality of ourselves. And it pulls together things almost like a massive supercomputer, okay? And it configures a new individual self, and it connects to the other network of the totality of the universal being, and it finds the right receptacle, the right parentage, if you like, to bring this life to fruition. And in that new life, various aspects of our past are sort of enabled, which we may not have had a chance to enable before, So that's a beautiful, perfect mechanism that is taking place, which takes us into a new existence, and it may not be necessarily to our liking, but it will assist our learning, It will drive our individual self to into a new expansive area.
And getting off the wheel?
Yeah, getting off the wheel is quite easy, really. You just have to unite with your higher self.
And then you get to choose.
Yeah, then you don't have any problems. But the thing is, you may not want to get off then. Because once you are united with yourself, you also feel this incredible love. And you feel this compassion. And you feel rather sorry about all the people who are sort of left behind. And I had a beautiful experience when I was in Mount Athos. It was a second experience with one of these icons the monk showed me. And the second icon he showed me was of a saint called Anastasia. She was murdered in Rome by the Romans 300 in the year 300 BC, or after Christ. And she was tortured to death. And when she was left, her body wouldn't decay. She was shiny. She was illuminated. Okay, and she became a saint. And when I was in front of her icon, I again had this incredibly powerful experience of her presence. Okay, so strong and so powerful that I was totally overwhelmed. And that was even more overwhelming than the first one I had. So the next day I tried to find the monk who invited me into the chapel, and I asked him whether I wanted to ask him whether I could see her again, but he wasn't there. So I tried to persuade other monks to let me into the chapel, and they wouldn't, and I was sort of I couldn't speak Greek. I was walking around with a postcard and said, here, I want to pray, take me into the chapel. Then after a while, one monk sort of started laughing. And he knew the guy who told him the story about what happened the previous day. And they opened the chapel up for me, and I was in front of this icon, and I meditated for about an hour. Okay. And then she appeared, not that I could see her, but I felt her presence. And the first thing she said, I'm not dead. Sort of forget the idea that I'm sort of a being of the past. I'm still very much alive. And then, of course, for about 6 months, I could just think of her, and I would feel her presence. Okay. And I was dead keen to find out where she lived. Okay. So in one of my meditations, I said, take me to your home, and I was expecting that she would take me on a joyride to heaven, But instead, what I found, I was in the most abysmal slum, very dark, very sinister, And I said, what are you doing? I asked you to take me to your home. And she said, my home is where I'm needed most.
Oh, wow.
And that is the thing. Once you want to get off the wheel, you may not see that as the best outcome for you, because you're not longer you as the ego self. You are much more than that. And so the compassion which is released by being this greater aspect of yourself compels you to do a lot more than looking after your self-interests. And that's where in Buddhism, the idea of the Bodhisattva comes from.
Always on the earth plane, though, you come to return, or are you needed elsewhere, perhaps?
Oh, yes, we have got multiple opportunities to go to different places. I remembered lives on another planet, which I visited several times, which I even visited after the planet died, was turned into an ice planet. And I felt a strong sense of bereavement when I came back. And for a day, I was very depressed. I talked to my wife about it, And she, being a psychologist, she said, oh, no, the planet represents your home. When you left Germany, that's your planet. You're feeling homesick, And I said, no, I actually lost the planet. But, so that's, it's not always to our liking, when we sort of visit past lives. I had some really miserable past lives, I'm not very proud of,
Well, I'm so grateful to you. Thank you so much. Going to certainly buy your books. Much gratefulness. Thank you.
All right. Gabriel, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Thank you very much. And thank you for the very insightful and very inspiring discussion we've been having. I was actually going to ask similar question to the previous person. What's the best way to learn how to astral project for the first time? And I heard you say that you're not here to as a teacher, you're more here as a reporter. Is there someone that you would recommend as someone that is effective at teaching people how to astral project for the first time?
Yeah, there are people. I would say probably the most natural way is the route through dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because we all dream anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And the only missing link is the awareness of being dream. So dream yoga, there are various people. One person I know personally is Robert Wagner. There are a few other people. There is also a Buddhist monk who's written, I can't remember his name at the moment. I can post some links perhaps to people. There are good books out there teaching you lucid dreaming. There are some teachers who charge money. There's one teacher, he's actually very, very expensive. But the thing is that people who follow his practice, and it does take discipline, a lot of discipline and focus. He told me that everybody who does his course and carries on with it, they are astral projecting. The only people who can't astral project are the ones who give up. Okay, and he runs a course which is a coaching, one-to-one coaching.
Yes.
Because every person is different, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he, charges quite a lot of money. But
Yes.
there are other teachers who run courses which are a lot cheaper. And because there are so many individual techniques, it's maybe it's just trial and error, really.
Yes.
But say you can do a lot by doing what I recommended earlier, keeping a dream journal, become more aware of your dream, following the lucid dream methods, because that to me is the most natural one, you know, because the point is when you become aware in your dream, then everything changes, you know. So that's, and most of my experiences came from lucid dreaming or through meditation when I went into a trance state, and then there was a clipping point. I just sort of clicked out of awareness and then became conscious in another reality.
What's the name of the coach who does the one-on-one coaching?
Oh, Florentine. If you're in Facebook, Florentine.
Yes.
We actually had an interview. I haven't posted anything, but we had a 2-hour session where he asked me a lot of questions, and
Yes.
where we sort of exchanged things. He's very good, but he's quite expensive. But he's
Yes.
a very genuine guy. But you have got to follow it.
Yes.
He has a technique where you catch the moment between waking and sleeping, which may only last a fraction of a second. He's got a technique which makes you aware of the flipping point. You know, he uses various techniques, and that seems to be one which works for a lot of people. You know, it's worth checking out, perhaps.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the very thoughtful answers.
Yeah, reality is sort of an incredible mystery, really. We don't really, we can, from our human point of view, we can't really say what's going to happen. You know, I would say reality is unknowable. You know, there are so many factors which shape reality, and we have an influence to a certain degree of how, you know, we determine the outcome. But from experience, lots of you probably know already that life always contributes other aspects which give you a new outcome, you know. And I find when you have a strong feeling of something you wish to achieve, or you know, where your passion lies, I would say, what you do with this energy is you create an attraction point, and you find other energies align themselves to this attraction, you know. So that is how you forge your path in life. So once I would always say, if you find your passion, you know, you're best served to find your passion and your love in life, you know, what you appreciate, where your gratitude lies. So if you find your passion, you are creating an energy stream, and your heart sort of draws things into your path, you know, and you're assisted in it. And I remember a time when I was a lot younger, and we were struggling as a family, you know. I was not earning much money. I thought I wanted to be rich. So I started reading all sorts of books and buying courses in order to be rich. And then in the end, I thought, oh, to be rich, I just invest money in the stock market. And I made some money, and I put a big lump sum aside to invest in the stock market. And lo and behold, I was investing in the futures. Okay, I bought contracts in gas and oil. I did a course before that. I said, I want to be rich. This is probably the quickest way. And it only took me 20 minutes to lose every penny I invested. And then I realized it was such a red herring, because right from the beginning, I didn't believe in it, you know. I just had the thought I wanted to be rich, but it didn't mean anything because I didn't believe in it. I didn't have the passion to do anything with it. And that was a very valuable lesson to me, you know. So I think what we need to find first is our passion, our love, okay? And also that stops us wasting time. You know, it's no good doing a job which we hate, although it may pay a lot of money, but the quality of life and the process of it is probably not worth pursuing, you know. So I thought that was money well spent, the 5,000 pounds I lost, you know, because I learned a big lesson in life. So it's not what we necessarily imagine we should do in order to find our path. It's more to find out where our heart is, you know, what connects us to the things we love, you know. And we may not necessarily make a lot of money this way, but we may lead happier lives, you know.
Right, because honestly, when I come to these spaces of, you know, higher consciousness, that's where my passion lies. That's where I feel like, okay, not necessarily I belong, but yeah, absolutely I belong. But like my passion is like exploring different states of consciousness and the whole path of healing. Not necessarily like, of course we need money to survive in this world, but I've I've also been in a place where, you know, I had the opportunity to make, you know, a lot of money, and I let it get to my ego. And that was a huge lesson because I lost all that. And if it hadn't been for that, then this process of awakening wouldn't have happened. So I'm definitely grateful for it. But now my passion's like, okay, yeah, I'd like to make enough money to survive. And of course we have to in this world, but my passion's exploring consciousness and healing, and just healing the world. And
Yes,
it's
that's a beautiful passion to have, isn't it? Because you're enriching other people, and in the process you're enriching yourself. And of course you're connecting to the collective, you know, to the collective consciousness, because we are not just singular human beings, individuals. We are a collective as well. There's our other aspect of us, you know. So to work within the community and with other people is part of our humanness. Yeah.
right, because there's no separation.
No.
Separation is just an illusion.
Yes. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
During the break here, I put up this slide, which is in one of your presentations on the higher dimensional levels. Maybe we can unpack this a little bit more. We can go back to it as we get through some of the questions here. But can you just say for a second which video this is from, or where people can find, you know, more information about your kind of mapping of these different dimensional realities?
Oh, this is on my website, multidimensionalman.com, where I outline the different stages of consciousness, which are, the best way to describe it is they're vibratory. The way I see it, they're vibratory states. Then there's not really a clear dividing line in the way it is outlined here. You know, it's just easier for the intellect or the mind to grasp what we're talking about, because the dimensional levels are literally infinite, you know, and whatever we focus on becomes a level of consciousness, becomes a reality, you know, and they can be, the best way to discriminate them is how they vibrate, what frequency they are. For example, negative thoughts have got a lower frequency than thoughts of love and compassion, you know, which take us into a higher level of reality and into a more refined environment. It also liberates our perception and expands our consciousness. Whereas on the lower levels, the dark levels, the sub-dimension, we are so focused on our ego self that there is no expansion beyond the ego point, and everything is focused on gratifying the limited aspect of our ego self. And therefore, our awareness doesn't have the possibility to expand, because it's sort of hampered by our limited outlook and by our fixations, our identifications, you know. So we continuously on the lower level trying to gratify aspects of our nature which are unfulfilled, you know. And to a certain degree, people who work on those levels, there's their natural environment, you know. As long as they find gratification there, they're sort of quite almost happy, you know, in that field. I've recently released a virtual reality experience, which is on one of these lower levels. So I invite people who have a headset to get a better feel for it rather than talking about it. What I described there is an environment which is quite dark, because the environment is a reflection of our inner feelings. But it also allows us to express these negative aspects in our nature and get to know them, get to come to face with them. And that's, so every aspect of consciousness serves a function, until we get to a point where we transcend our ego identification and go into a more expansive state of consciousness. When this happens, we immediately attract a more positive, more gratifying, more sublime levels, more harmonized level, and also our opportunities increase of experience the higher we rise through these dimensional levels.
Yeah, perfect. You had said, let me just call it up here. You had said before that when we either go out of body or when we die, our inner environment becomes our outer environment.
Mm.
Yeah, I really like the way that you put that, that our inner environment becomes our outer environment.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's basically it's a congruence between how we feel and what we attract through our feeling, So there has to be we can't be in an environment which is not congruent with our feelings. We just feel uncomfortable in it. I experienced that early on when I had out-of-body experience. I saw a city while I was flying through a landscape. I saw a city, and it was based in light. And as I approached the city, I started feeling uncomfortable. My vibration or my frequency was not adapted to the city, so I couldn't get there. So I went back. Later, I went into these more luminous regions without any problems, because my inner frequency was adapted to it. And I could enter into these higher states and visit these luminous cities, So our inner world attracts us to an environment which is congruent with our feelings. And also the other thing is we project our feelings into the outside world. And on the astral level, we create things, the environment. For example, if we are angry and we harbor anger, we create what I call artificial entities. They're like little demons we can create, which are sort of become our companions. So you very often find that people who harbor negative feelings, they're almost like they're taking on a life of their own, and they prey on them. The same happens when we have very positive feelings. We attract beautiful energies, And in my first book, I wrote a whole chapter about how we create our landscape, not just how our feelings can be personified, can be turned into entities, things like that. So I talk about thought forms and how they materialize. And we do that on a daily basis. We create sort of helpful energies or negative energies, So that's why it's very important to err on the side of love, in life. Always give preference to love rather than maintaining our resentments, and our negative feelings.
Amen to that. So the order of questions here is Rob, then Inoshi, then Rosemary, then Eric. So Rob, why don't you go ahead?
Myself. Hi. Yeah, thanks, Michael, for organising this. This has been fabulous. And Jurgen, you're a blessing. Yeah, I've kind of been exploring this all my life. I had one of the first Lucidity Institute dream lights back in the 80s, and explored lucid dreams and spent years trying to cultivate them, having first read about them in Carlos Castaneda's A Separate Reality, which he referred to, and was really frustrated by the fact that one of my sons, until he was pubescent, could just lucid dream every night as much as he liked.
Yes. Yes. So,
oh, go on, sorry.
No. There's often a contradiction. The more you try, the harder you try, the less you succeed, you know. And there's it's a phenomena very often that sets in. If you try too hard, it eludes you. But then when you relax, it suddenly happens spontaneously.
Yeah, definitely. I did have one particularly interesting set of experiences using the dream light, and basically what was happening was that I'd wake up terrified and I couldn't remember what had happened, and this went on for a couple of weeks, and I just stopped doing it because I was completely exhausted from, I'd wake up panicked and not be able to get back to sleep. And years later I read in Castaneda's, I think it might have been The Art of Dreaming, that there are gates to dreaming, and the first gate of dreaming is terror.
Yes, that's interesting, because terror very often leads to lucid dreaming, and sometimes there's a psychologist, I can't remember her name. Yeah, she actually teaches children to lucid dream who have been traumatized. She runs classes, and she's very successful because she teaches the children, once they have this figure, a repeat nightmare, she teaches them, next time you have a nightmare like that, you just ask the figure, what do you want? Or what do you represent, and you wake up in your nightmare. And then she gives techniques for the children to deal with the terror, until they are resolved. I don't know much more about it. She has written a book about it. But so yeah, there's a terror which actually can, or fear which can actually trigger a lucid dream, especially if there are repeat dreams. If you have the same dream over and over again, you can use that as a trigger to become lucid. I had an interesting dream. Sometimes you have dreams which are a metaphor of something that's happening in your life. For example, one of my favorite dreams was, which I kept having, was that my car got stolen. Okay, so that happened frequently, and I said, oh, next time my car gets stolen, it never got stolen in real life. Next time I dream about my car is stolen, I remember that I'm dreaming. Okay, and then I become lucid. So you can use repetitive dreams, or let's say we have a favorite dream, a favorite place, because we have got we lead a double life, on the astral level. Very often we have got a home there sometimes, which we go back to. So we could just, in our dream journal, we just get a track record of what we dream about. And when we discover a repeating dream pattern, we can then say, next time I dream about that, before I go to sleep, I know it's a dream and I will be lucid in my dream. So we can use our dreams as an entry point into the next dimension. And then the other thing which I told to do, which I did very early on, the moment I become lucid in my dream, instead of being carried away in the lucid dream, I focus on the ground or on my hands. But I prefer the ground because sometimes the hands are not necessarily there to focus on, you know. So I pick up the thing from the environment, like a stone or a bit of grass, and I study it very closely until all the dream narrative disappears and I just see the grass or the pebble. And then I become more and more clear and aware. And then the dream narrative disappears and I'm on the astral level. And the astral level is exactly like this level. I can walk around in it. And it becomes so real that I have to make sure it's not physical. And the next test I do then is to do the hover test, you know, to make sure I'm not doing anything in the physical world, because there's no difference in consciousness. So I usually lift off the air, and then I know I can hover or fly. I know it's a dream, you know, or I'm on the astral level. And then everything unfolds like it would in normal life. You meet people, you can talk to them. Sometimes they invite you to the astral home, you know, have coffee and things like that. Once you're established on the astral level and your waking awareness is really lucid, you can spend hours, you know, and take your time, because it's a more natural environment for your spirit aspect, for your soul, than the physical aspect, you know. There was a time when I felt, oh, it was easier to spend time on the astral level in this type of awareness, and it's going back to the body. And I was seriously worried whether I may have died, you know, because it felt so natural being on the astral level, you know. So I went back, and one instant I went back 2 or 3 times to check my body was still breathing. You know. So this phenomena explains a lot about some yogis and Buddhist monks who spend extended periods during meditation. They're actually in a different state of consciousness. You know, they put their body into suspended hibernation for a time. And there's a very natural state to be in.
Yeah.
Another just curious about your comments on this. I read Robert Monroe's books, and I just had to go to the Monroe Institute and check out his Lifelines course, where you have to do the Gateway course first to do the Lifelines.
Yeah.
Lifelines is soul retrieval. So you go out into the astral and you find people who died and got stuck. And then you take them to your place that you've constructed and invoke helpers to come and.
Yes,
that's unbelievable.
It's a very worthwhile occupation when you're astral traveling to actually help people. You know, I went through a sort of regime of helping people across one night until I was almost exhausted, which I described in Vistas of Infinity. I had a guide who made me take people across through all sorts of kinds of situations, people dying in a delirium, you know, going through a nightmarish transition period and all sorts of things, you know. And that's it's a great sort of need for people to help other people, because lots of people, and that was the main motive why I started, published Vistas of Infinity, because most people are totally oblivious of life after death. They have no idea, you know, what's happening. And they may have a vague belief of there is a life, but they don't know what it looks like. They don't know what to expect and what happens when they get there. And the best way to prepare is by becoming aware now, you know, because then there's no such thing as a transition. You are simply still aware. When the body gives up, you carry on being aware, you know, and you're still your happy self. The environment then, of course, may change to your benefit then, because your vibration is already so high through awareness that you end up in a very beautiful place, you know.
It's quite practical too. We got some friends who've got a holiday place in Wales, and it felt a bit strange the first few times we went there, and I realised that there was an old lady there who it had been her place sometime, maybe 100 years ago, and she was still there.
No, interesting. Yeah.
Being able to help people like that in a really practical way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Anyway,
Awesome.
thank you. It's a delight to encounter somebody like you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Okay. So there was a question from Inoshi. So I'm going to put a slide up here just for some context to this question. It was about the causal level. And Inoshi, you can feel free to unmute your microphone to clarify anything, but just give me 1 second. Okay, so here's another diagram that you've made, Jurgen, of consciousness and corresponding dimensions. And so we've got the ones that, you know, you've been talking about, the astral level, and then there's these higher dimensional counterparts, mental dimensions or thought worlds, what you're calling lower heavens. And then as we kind of, you know, increase our vibratory frequency, we've got transcended thought worlds, higher heavens, and yeah, can't be referred to in physical terms from here onwards. And then you've got this bandwidth that you're calling causal, and that's somehow related to the maybe finest level of individual consciousness, and somehow related to cosmic consciousness. But so maybe we can ask it this way. How would a person know if they were experiencing what you're calling the causal level of being?
I think, yeah, it's an interesting place, or an interesting state, really, because there's still a sort of object and subject and outside world. But the thing is, you're experiencing the outside world from the inside out. Okay. For example, let's say you're walking through a beautiful landscape and you see a brook, water, you know, you sit at the water, you listen to the water, and suddenly you become the water. You know, you're enchanted by the sound the water makes, and suddenly it becomes your sound. You know, so you identify with the water. So you lose a sense of separation in the causal level. Another experience could be is that let's say, yeah, you're looking at a flower, and in order to appreciate the flower fully, you have to become the flower. So you feel what it's like to be a flower. I recently had an experience which was really quite dramatic. I became a glacier, okay? And that was really something which I never sort of experienced it, but I had the consciousness of a glacier. It sounds ridiculous, but I had this never-ending time, this incredible time, and this serenity of a totally different perception of being. Okay, it only lasted for a couple of minutes or something, you know, but you can actually enter into the consciousness of being something else. Okay, and I think there's another method of meditation, when you, for example, focus on something, let's say you want to focus on an apple as part of your exercise, you can taste the apple, okay? And then you can think, oh, what does the apple feel when it is being tasted? So you can take it to another level. And there's a sort of aspect in psychology which is called Gestalt. And in Gestalt, you're taking on aspects of what you see and what you experience, and you take the aspect inside and see it from that point of view. For example, I trained as an art therapist when I was younger, and we used Gestalt therapy in painting. So people would paint a picture expressing how they felt. Let's say there was a black blob and a green blob, and the black blob was sort of encroaching on the green blob. So you would ask the person who painted it, they would say, oh, I feel threatened, you know. And then you change role and you say to them, what if you are the black blob? How does that feel being the black blob? And in this sort of psychology, this switch in psychology, the person is confronting their fears. And in higher states of consciousness, basically you recognize that you are everything, okay? And you can quite easily switch identity from one thing to another, because at the root of your being, you are cosmic consciousness. So you can enter into shape, and on the higher levels, this is made really easy. And because of the prevailing feeling is one of love. So you identify with the person you love and you feel attracted to, and then you get the experience of what you're attracted to, you know. And of course, bringing it down into the human level, if we take this consciousness and bring it down onto the human level, this is where we generate empathy, you know. And this is how we change the world we live in, you know, for example, by looking at our environment, you know, how we, when we are sort of confronted with extinction events where species disappear. But what we're doing is we're harming ourselves, you know. And if we enough of us generate this sort of empathy from the root, then it becomes quite natural to save our environment, because we feel there's no other way, you know. Our attitudes will change quite naturally. And this is a point where we seem to be hovering at the moment as a species, that people, or some people, become more aware of what we're doing to our world, you know, because we're part of it.
That's quite profound. This is Inoshi. Thank you so much for taking that question.
Yeah, it's a great question, Inoshi. Okay, let's see. Just going back to the chat here for a second. Okay, Rosemarie, go for it.
Yeah, hello, Jürgen. It's very fascinating, all the things that you explain. And I wished I could speak in holographic ways, because there is so many other questions packed into, they're all intertwined. So anyway, until now, my main idea was that there is a difference between dreaming or even lucid dreaming and actually having a so-called out-of-body experience. And I took a few seminars with Michael. And as you certainly know, here it's about inhabiting the body and not leaving it. So the exact opposite to achieve higher or different states of consciousness. Likewise, in the Sami tradition, when they do their shamanic travels, I now found out from two different sources, they refer to as going inward and not going outward, which I understand they mean the body. So could you please expand on that? Because I don't know how to reconnect those two ideas.
Yes, I think, I think what they mean by that is the outward world is a world which we perceive as our senses and the physical world we live in, okay? The inner world, the way I see it, is the heart, the inner consciousness, you know. So you're really, I think William Buhlman, he says you don't travel anywhere outside. You're just focusing your awareness at various points. And the Monroe Institute, or Robert Monroe, they call it focus points. You know, where you focus your attention. So they've got various focus points, focus 27, you know, you name it. I'm not very familiar with their technique, but this is basically what is happening there. They're going inside as compared to the external world, the physical world, which is the world of the senses, which is limited because we cannot really explore consciousness through the physical world. What we can do is we can actually use our senses to get out of our mind, you know, to root ourselves in reality. Okay, so if we, for example, become aware of being, become aware of our breathing, you know, or whatever it is, we can transcend this feeling into an awareness itself, into pure awareness, you know. So I think it was Fritz Lang, the psychologist, he said, get out of your mind and get into your senses, you know, meaning we use our senses, our physical senses, to grow into awareness, into a being state, you know, by feeling it. I don't know whether that makes sense. It just sort of, because you mentioned earlier being rooted in physical life. Of course, that's really important, to be rooted in reality, you know, because, but with awareness, being rooted in reality with awareness of a being state. And the being state is pure love. That sounds, what I'm just saying sounds a little bit almost religious. I don't mean to sound like that. But yeah, it's basically what one of my meditation techniques is to feel, to be. You know, if I've got a discomfort, I just accept it. I'm being it. You know, it's another way of identifying with what is from the inside. For example, let's say you have a pain, you have a back pain, rather than sort of fighting against it. If you are going into the pain and you are the pain, you have got a much better chance to assimilate the pain, you know, to heal it from the inside, so to speak. Because instead of rejecting it or demonizing it, you're embracing it in a way. And I find, for me personally, that tends to work very well, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds to me a bit like when you go inside the body and the senses and inhabiting it, or doing vipassana is a lot more formless than the so-called out of body. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, you go into the root of your body, into the root aspect, the higher consciousness, if you like, of the body by
I have a slide for this, Jurgen, if you want a visual for people.
Okay.
Okay, give me 1 second.
There's a difference between the ego mind versus the illuminated mind. The ego mind has got an identification and it assimilates information, how they best relate to the identification, to the needs of the person, you know. So everything is referred to in terms of what the person believes. So this where you get, for example, people who are prone to conspiracy thinking. You know, they filter out information which fits their worldview or their belief, and they ignore other information which don't fit the belief. You know, so you get people building conspiracy theory as an example, and filter out things which don't fit the theory, or if they can't be filtered out, they are put into the camp of the hostility. They are the part of the conspiracy. Everything is woven into this build of identification, seeing the world from a particular viewpoint. And that's what's happening in the world, that people are addicted to their limited beliefs. And therefore you get people, when they disagree with it, either they are sort of, if you're on Facebook, you are unfriended, or you get into a row or something, you know. And I had this experience, and people who are addicted to these kind of belief systems, they're very intolerant of beliefs which are not congruent with their beliefs. Now, if you get the other slide, the illuminated mind is completely different. You see reality from a completely different viewpoint, which is not attached to a belief. You know, you just see reality as it is, and you don't take any sides. You just see the way things are, and you get to a much better understanding of how things operate. And also you are in a much better position to make better informed decisions, because you don't take sides. You just see the energies for what they are. So if we operate from this level, we usually find a much smoother path through reality, and also we get a much better relationships, because we don't judge people, you know, because we accept the fact that people have different viewpoints, because every point on this diagram is actually a viewpoint, you know. But because we're taking a universal viewpoint, we see the different aspects and their value in the whole network. So we are in a much better place to decide what is good and what is harmful for us. This is how politicians should operate, you know. But they don't, unfortunately.
I wanted to just speak, Rosemary, to what you said, because you'd mentioned taking classes with me, and I'm a body-focused meditation teacher. But I think that the important thing here is that we don't get trapped at the mental level of anything. So for instance, right, if somebody is an atheist and they're getting into, non-duality experiences and whatnot, and then they might have a lucid dream or two or something like that, but they don't want to go too far into that because it's quote unquote woo-woo, they're still getting trapped at the mental level of their experience, because they're taking a kind of divided positionality against something that's just part of consciousness. Now, conversely, just to be fair, if somebody were into, lucid dreaming or other consciousness realms, but they weren't really attending to the things in their life, but they wanted to get into those realms because they were quote unquote more real, that's another type of positionality that's also creating an adversarial relationship against experience. So, in my experience, when I've had lucid dreams, I wake up feeling much more embodied and, full of energy and life force and so on. Because all we're really doing is getting into our consciousness. And as Jurgen said, we're rooting in reality itself. And that includes being present and being embodied in whatever body we find ourselves in.
Yeah, thank you. The illumined mindset versus the egoic one, that was very helpful. And I still want to add, just as there is false awakening in lucid dreams. Actually, I had that recently during a course, because until then I didn't even take that seriously. There's also those stories that also Jurgen told about, that there are people who have died and aren't aware of it. And I was always wondering how this is possible at all, and that you somehow are still too much in your egoic mindset if that happens.
Yes,
Could
we are
you
sort of
explain it that way?
Yes, what happens is we are so wrapped up in our physical reality mindset. You know, when we die, nothing really changes much. It's a bit like walking out of our front door. You know, we may be surprised by certain things. For example, we, instead of let's say we die in a beautiful summer's day, but our mind is gloomy and we walk into death and suddenly it's raining and it's winter, you know. Because we don't know what's going on, our irrational mindset sort of takes over, and we find a narrative to explain it, not necessarily logical, but this is how I found how people deal with incongruence when they die. You know, we deal with incongruence on a daily basis. Things happen, but we accept them for what they are, and we then, without being scientific about it, we know certain things happen in life. And in a dream, we still, let's say we see a flying pig in a dream. In a dream, we don't really question it, you know, or see a horse with two heads. In our dream, that's quite okay. We don't question it. And when people die, they're usually in this sort of unaware state of dream, okay? And they take this unawareness into the afterlife and they don't question it. It's just a dream, okay? They have nothing really to compare it with. They are just here now and they are aware, but their mind is not awakened. They're still in a dream. So very often you find people who are not aware that they have died. And I had several experiences. One was a friend of my wife's husband who died of cancer. And I met him out of body, and I said, "Oh, Brian, how are you?" He said, "Oh, I'm a lot better. You know, my cancer is almost gone now." He was completely unaware that he had died, and I didn't have the heart to tell him, you know. But this is very often what happens with people. They maintain their lack of awareness, you know, and very often, sooner or later, they catch on. They have people, sometimes instantly, sometimes they have helpers, sometimes they have relatives who appear and they suddenly find, oh, Granny shouldn't be here because she is dead, you know. So they suddenly realize, oh, I'm dead, you know. Mm-hmm. But the thing is when I try to explain to people what is it like to be dead, and the best way to get a feeling of what it's like to be dead is by opening the front door and walk outside, because things are not that different, you know. We will come across in time, we will come across at what we call inconsistencies, or there are things which are different. But the feeling of being alive is exactly the same as it is here, to the extent that people still go to their office, you know. And I went to workplaces where people were working in offices with literally having nothing to do, you know, occupying themselves. And it's ludicrous, really, what happens to unaware people when they die. They don't know what to do with themselves. You know, they carry on with what they're used to, although it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And it's quite interesting to watch it until they waken up and they suddenly grasp, oh, there are a lot more things I can do which I couldn't do before. you know. So yeah, that's an interesting thing, really.
Yeah, thank you. That cleared it up some more. And it sounds a lot like becoming lucid in a dream, the process you just described.
Yes, we have to come lucid. I mean, the vast majority of people alive today, they're not really alive, you know, in a dream world. You can see it on a daily basis. For example, you see the different worlds people invent for themselves, they live in, you know, and you can clearly see it, the distortion of reality. You know, we live in a post-truth world where people don't have any problems in living with lies and accepting lies as fact. You know, that is a really interesting thing. We've sort of deviated from discriminating between fantasy and reality. You know, we just no longer, and people get away with it. They get away with telling lies, and people accept it quite happily, you know, and they go along with it. And it's an internet phenomenon where people make money out of lies, you know.
Yeah, that's unfortunately true. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Rosemarie. Eric, go for it.
Yeah, I first want to say I'm really grateful and happy to be here, and I'm feeling a lot of love. And I was curious about maybe two things. So the concept of sort of nirvana, or going off the wheel, or the path of the Bodhisattva, is that a thing that you decide if it ever gets to that? And if you've chosen the path of Bodhisattva, can you change and choose to get off the wheel? So
yes,
that,
I think once you get to the state, you have got unlimited freedom. You decide what you want to do. You know, there's nobody or nothing anymore that compels you to do anything which is not congruent with what you wish to do as the individual person you are. You escape from the compulsion of being subject to other people's will, you know, not even the highest will, you know. The highest will is very, very compassionate and very generous in allowing you to do whatever you want to do, you know. And that's a beautiful thing. You can get off the wheel and stay off the wheel for the rest of eternity. There's nothing that compels you. It's just you who decides in the end which path you want to follow. And the Bodhisattva ideal comes from the realization that you are all, you know, and that you can only find real happiness if every other creature is also happy, because you're all. And that of course is an individual choice you make, but you may see it slightly different. You may not see it as suffering. You may see it as the way things are and the way they need to be. So you decide, oh, the Bodhisattva idea is not for me, because that is what the higher will intended it to be, the suffering and everything. I'm okay with that, you know. So it's totally up to the individual which path they want to go. You can roam throughout eternity, do whatever you want to do. You can choose another life form. You know, it's totally up to you. When you embraced total freedom, total realization, then it's really up to you how you want to spend this realization, you know.
Yeah, awesome. If a person were really struggling and thinking of ending their life as a solution to their problems, what would you say to them if you could interact with a person directly who was in that situation?
Yeah. Well, the important thing is that the first thing, I wouldn't want to judge a person who makes this choice, you know, because there may be compelling reasons why the person has chosen to do that. You know, there may be the realization that they have a life of suffering in the physical body, which makes it unbearable to continue, you know, and they've bitten off more than they can chew, you know. There are various reasons, there are individual reasons why people may choose so, and they're not necessarily, you have to bear in mind there's no moral judgment. There's no moral judge at the other side which says, oh, you're foregone the God-given life, now you have to pay the price for it. It's an individual choice people make, and they've got an individual way of dealing with it. You know, so every individual person who tries or terminates a life, they've got their own way of dealing with it and coming to terms with it. You know, so that looks different from case to case.
So then what do they see on the other side? Have you interacted with anyone who has died from suicide?
I have only come across a suicide bomber I mentioned earlier, and he was in a very pitiful state. I've come across two suicide bombers, one after the London Bridge bombing, London Bridge terror attack. I met the person, and they are in a very pitiful state very often because they have to deal with all the energies which they released, you know, which are coming back on them. And they cannot undo these energies. They are sort of subjected to them. But some suicides, they feel very regretful when they become aware of the suffering they cause to other people, because very often people who are in a mental trauma, they are not aware of the love of other people. They're so focused on their own suffering that they only become aware of it when it becomes obvious that the people are affected by it, you know, and then it's irreversible. And they often go through a healing process after that, you know, and like you do here on Earth with people who have received counseling, you know, you get the same sort of nurturing over there.
Yeah.
Okay, great question. Okay, and Michael's, if you have a dream about, for instance, a relative that's deceased and everything seems normal, but we know that they've deceased, is that the time where we would be well advised to inform them? And I want to add a little something to this. Would it be something where you kind of feel into the situation and just see what's appropriate if you have that lucidity to do so?
Yes, I think, I mean, the natural instinct is to want to help people, you know, to see what they're lacking, what their needs are, you know. So your natural instinct is to help people. I don't have any rules, really. I mean, I am always totally guided by what the situation requires, you know, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, makes sense. Just like being here, you know, you interact with a number of different people and you sort of respond dynamically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So,
Well, go ahead. So no, I just wanted to thank you for being so generous with your time once again. Do you, if you want to take a minute just to talk about any current projects you're involved in and how people can learn about those and you know, participate if they wanted to and that sort of thing.
Yes, I think by nature I'm actually an artist. You know, that's right from the beginning. I always wanted to be an artist, and I became an artist. And the thing I tried to do was, when I had my out-of-body experiences, was to make pictures, you know, and I wanted to make photographic pictures. And I'm a digital illustrator. And then I started doing 3D images using the technology which is used in the film industry. And that allowed me to do very, very graphic pictures. Now, I thought, instead of doing pictures, it would be good if you could actually enter into the pictures and explore it from the inside. That has always been my dream ever since 3D technology became available. Now, my latest project is to, with the advent of virtual reality, to create environments which I have encountered during my out-of-body experiences, and make them into virtual reality. So people can, if they buy a headset, they have a 360-degree vision and an experience of the images which I try to portray. And so far I've done 6 or 7 experiences which people can go to my website and download onto the headset if they have one. And what I do is I try to work with a composer, Craig Bruce, who is also a meditator and a good friend of mine. He's trying to create a soundscape which makes it more immersive, especially when I'm trying to create sort of more illuminated environments, more heavenly type of environments. And he's very good at creating mantric sounds. So the idea is that when you immerse yourself in this virtual reality, you open up an inner sense of feeling or higher feelings. And there are several experiences I have created. One is like the tunnel experience you can drive through when you have an out-of-body experience or a near-death experience. The tunnel experience is very often comes about when you rise from one vibratory state to another state. So people get the feeling they're going through a tunnel. And I use this tunnel experience in a virtual reality setting, so people get a feeling what it's like to rise into higher states of consciousness. And Craig has produced some amazing sounds. And one of the experiences called cosmic consciousness, you know. And Craig has done exactly, because he has experienced it, he's done exactly the right soundtrack for the pictures. And so we're working together to create a feeling of what it's like. The latest one I've done, I try to give people a here now experience. I call them virtual reality documentaries, where people, instead of looking at it on the screen, they can actually enter the environment and then get a feeling of what it's like. So the last one was on a very nebulous, lower astral level, lower consciousness level, you know. The very first one is where you can actually walk around in the environment. The way of walking, the energy has been reduced, so you can only walk at a certain pace, you know. And as you walk through the environment, you hear voices, you know, people lamenting and things. I compensated that by creating 3 or 4 higher, more uplifting experiences. And one I've been trying to do is if people played before they go to sleep, trying to induce lucidity, you know. So all these things, they're very much at an experimental stage, but I just want to give, instead of documenting my experience in terms of a book or pictures. I want to get a more immersive feeling for it. And perhaps it may trigger a lucid dream. Who knows? But it's all very experimental. It's still at the beginning. I had a lot of support from people who were on board of it, on board with it. So it allows me to expand the project. So I was able to buy 2 headsets, one for Craig and one for myself. I updated my computer with more power. And recently, some donations have been used to create much better environments, which would take me years to create, you know, so I just bought assets for this. So if anybody feels that this is a worthwhile project and they want to be part of it, there's a donate button on my page, but it's not necessary. At the moment, everything goes quite naturally, and everybody can download what I produce absolutely free, whether they contribute or not, you know, and that's the idea behind the project.
Got it. Yeah, awesome. And it's the website for your astral overview or virtual reality project that renders these dimensions of consciousness is magicfantasyart.com. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yes. So you go to it, and I keep a progress report. So people who donated money, they know exactly what the money is used for, how the project progresses, you know. There are sort of other videos which people can look at, how to learn how to use headsets and things like that, you know. So it's all, and I keep, at the moment, the latest project is quite labor intensive, so that may take another month before I release it. And another project I started is to simulate an out-of-body experience. You know, so when people put the headset on, they rise from their bed, they turn around, they see the body lying on bed, and because it's so immersive, you then go through the window out into the astral world. And so I want to give people a much better feeling of what it's like to have an out-of-body experience.
Awesome. Yeah. And for your other works, for your books, explorations of multidimensionality, writings, you've got that at multidimensionalman.com. That's your other website.
Yes,
Okay.
that's right. Yes.
Perfect.
And one website is dedicated to the 10-minute moment. It's basically, there's a meditation technique and also a little bit of a breakdown of what happened in the book, you know. So
Is that
the 10minutemoment.com.
It's the 10minutemoment.com.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Perfect. But yeah, really wanted to thank you for doing this. This has been great. And getting just so much positive feedback in the comments here from folks, and you know, gratitude and appreciation. So
it's a great.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me, Mike. I didn't even know. You know, it's so good to have kindred spirits.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know, maybe we can talk more about if you're interested in doing things like this in the future. If people wanted to zero in on a specific topic here or there, if you're open to that, I'm sure that this group would be open to that.
Well, thank you very much
Okay.
for listening for so long.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Jurgen.